Anyway, so about today's topic, we are going to talk about the very new topic today, and that is shell. Okay, so it's a very good one, and this is one of the most interesting topic in the next that is going to make couple of changes in your understanding. Okay, so what exactly shell is? So first of all, let's talk about this hardware. Okay, so for example, this is your hardware where your CPU, RAM and everything is there. Okay, your hardware is completely an electronic device. That means ICs and chips and everything is there. That simply means it is completely an electronic device, and that is a set of gates and chips. Okay, that means definitely we need to connect with the hardware, then we need kind of support. So when we discussed about operating system architecture a bit, we discussed about three individual components. Okay, the core and the main one was kernel, that is responsible for interacting with the hardware. The second was something XYZ, and the top one was applications, or I can say software. Okay, now why this thing got created? See, if I want to connect with the hardware, I want to talk to the hardware, I need to understand either machine level language, or maybe binary language. So we need to have some program that can interact with hardware, and that program is kernel. So in short, what I can say is kernel is someone that understand machine level language, because that is going to interact with the hardware. तो इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि दो इंसान या दो एंटिटी आपस में तभी बात करती हैं जब उनकी लैंग्वेज आपस में कंपैटिबल है. ओके, so that's why kernel is pretty much understanding machine level language. Okay, but what about us? Okay, so let's say if I'm a user, I can either click or I can type. If I am clicking somewhere, I'm giving input in a very high level language. Even if I'm typing, so I need to type in the language that I understand. So for example, I understand English or Hindi or maybe any other. So I'm taking English as an example. So if I'm typing, let's say, date in my terminal and expecting output in the same language as well, but ये होगा कैसे? क्योंकि डेट कमांड को जब तक आपके रैम में आप एग्जीक्यूट नहीं करोगे सीपीयू की हेल्प से, so that command cannot be executed. So that means we are typing this, but we are getting output here. But question is how? Okay, so here I'm just creating this diagram again. So again, this is my hardware, and to connect with hardware, we already have a very well planned and well designed product called kernel. And to interact with humans, like for us, we have some software. Okay, that means if I want to write, I have text editor. If I want to send some command, I have CMD or I have terminal. What if I want to browse something, if I want to Google something, I have a browser. So whatever we have, that means whatever software or application we can connect with, these are applications. The thing is, we are always giving input in our own language, right? So let's say I'm taking example of terminal. Okay, so if I'm typing like date as a command, so date command is written in this language, and this language is understood by people and me, maybe humans. But how this date is received by kernel, because you know what, kernel is understanding machine level language, machine language. तो मतलब ये हुआ कि कर्नल को अगर आप डेट कमांड दोगे तो कर्नल इज नॉट एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड. So that means we need some interpreter, some mediator here that can take input from you, number one, and that can translate this exactly language to the kernel compatible language. Okay, that means it's a kind of translator that is going to take input from you and it is going to, you know, convert for kernel. Now kernel will pass this to the hardware for execution purpose. That is number 3. It will execute that program here, then it will respond back to kernel again, and kernel will send the outcome in the same language to this product, like number 5, and this program will reconvert that output in our language, number 6, and we get the date command output here. तो मतलब क्या हुआ कि when I type this and I hit enter, I get the output, but the real story is this. Okay, so this mediator program that is, you know, translating your input for kernel, and that is also translating the output by kernel to you in your own language, that is shell. Okay, so shell is an intermediate program between user and kernel. I hope ये आपको थोड़ा सा समझ में आया होगा. तो अगर आपसे कोई definition पूछे, right, somebody gonna ask definition. So let's say if this is a kernel and this is you as a user and you are giving some input here. So we need some program in between that can act as an, you know, mediator, or I can say it is a middleware where it is taking your input, translating back to kernel. Whatever kernel is responding, it is translating back to you. Okay, so kind of it's the shell is an interface between user and kernel. You don't have to, you know, remember the definition of shell. You can always pretend as an interpreter. Okay, that is going to take input from you and it is going to convert it for kernel, and this kernel will respond back and everything. So number 1, number 2, number 3, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm not explaining that hardware process, but in short, this is your shell. Okay, so I hope not exactly, not language, it's a, you know, kind of interpreter that is going to interpret your input for the, you know, the next product that is compatible to that. तो यदि आपको ये समझ में आ रहा है, whatever I'm trying to say about kernel, just say yes in the chat window so that I can proceed with the very much, you know, next thing about kernel, sorry, shell. Okay, so all right, so first, you know, answer I am getting it. Okay, wonderful guys. So in short, you are understanding the role of kernel, sorry, role of shell. Okay, now in any of the operating system we have number of shells. Okay, number of shells we have. So if you talk about Linux specifically, the number of shells we are having, there are a number of shells. So shell we have is like bash. This is the most awesome and most popular shell ever, right? Ah yes, Ashif, it is a, right? Okay, now again sh or tcsh. CSH or corn shell, or we are calling it KSH, and many more. So in the world of Linux, we have these kind of shell. Okay, so simply we are generally having these shells. Now it's up to you what shell you want to use, because maximum people are using bash, so we are also going to use bash. Okay, so why there are so many shells are there? Because of the reason they have number of features. Okay, so we have number of features. All right, so in a simple term, bash is the one that we are going to discuss with, and bash stand for born again shell. It is designed by a developer called Born and again shell. Okay, so I'll be giving you a lot of reasons why we need to use bash shell instead of any other, so you'll be having that answer. But if someone gonna ask you where exactly your shell is, okay, where exactly, some people are saying your terminal is like your shell. No, terminal is not a shell. Terminal is a software that is connecting to your shell. Okay, so every operating system having number of shells supported. Okay, but out of these number of shells, there is some shell that is default set with your OS, right? So because we are using Fedora, and Fedora has default shell as bash. Okay, Fedora is also having supported shell. That means whatever the rest of shells that is supported by Fedora and out of the given list. So you cannot say by default Fedora is supporting all, but default is bash. So how do you really understand which shell are supported by Fedora? So there is a file called etc shells, right? And I hit enter. So number of shells supported by Fedora is, let's say, sh, bash, then tmux and tmux. Okay, if they are repeating it, there is a reason, right? So simply you don't have to repeat it. They are located at two different locations, but by default your Fedora is having bash, sh and tmux. But out of these, which one is default? Okay, which one is your default shell? So the answer can be given by number of ways. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you one more theory for the same, how you check the shell. So for example, let's say if I want to give you one idea how commands are executed in any Linux kernel, in any Linux based OS. Okay, so assume this is your kernel, and kernel is connected with your hardware. Okay, and this is you, and this is your software or application where you are giving your input. Okay, when you give your input, it is going to interact with the shell first. Now I can just name it like a bash. Okay, now what was the job of bash in earlier days? it is taking input from you and it is translating it for kernel. Okay, when it is translating it for kernel, kernel is checking that program in the hard disk and executing it. Okay, once it got successfully executed, it is responding back to shell, and shell is going to retranslate it for you. That was the very standard process we used to do in earlier days, right? But when this model was proposed, there was a bug. So people, hacked that model because of couple of reasons. So for example, ऐसा मानते हैं कि let's say मैंने एक command दी date कुछ भी लिख के, and the command is going to receive by your shell. What was the role of shell? The shell role was to translate this input to the kernel compatible instruction. तो इसने क्या किया, कर्नल को ट्रांसलेट करके दे दिया, मान लो डेट यहाँ पे आ गई. Now kernel cannot directly execute this. Kernel has to check in the hard disk that the program you typed on the terminal or wherever you type, सबसे पहली बात, is the program is existing in my storage or not. मतलब जो प्रोग्राम आपने टाइप किया है वो हार्ड डिस्क में है भी या नहीं. यदि वो है तो उसे एग्जीक्यूट करवा के एंड वापस से शेल को दो एंड शेल उसे ट्रांसलेट करके वापस पहुंचा देगा. ओके, ये सारी स्टोरी इज़ वेरी गुड, बट सम अनऑथेंटिक यूजर्स लाइक अ हैकर, और मे बी आप अपने बारे में भी बात कर सकते हैं. व्हाट if you are giving a command like data, you are mistyping it, मतलब आप जानबूझ के मिसटाइप कर रहे हो, तो आपने बड़े प्यार से शेल को पकड़ा दिया. What shell is doing? Shell is very भोला भाला product and shell is translating it for kernel. कर्नल वापस जाके हार्ड डिस्क में चेक करेगा एंड क्या पता पड़ा कि डेटा जैसा कोई कमांड या इनपुट तो हमारे पास है ही नहीं, राइट? नहीं है. तो वापस से कर्नल शेल को बताएगा कि सॉरी ब्रो, आई डोंट हैव एनी कमांड लाइक दिस. ठीक है, ये कोई बड़ी बात नहीं, इट्स फाइन. बट व्हाट इफ अगर आपने शेल से एज अ यूजर बार बार ये कमांड दो, मतलब आप एक सेकेंड के अंदर यू कैन हिट 1000 टाइम्स डेटा कमांड. सो आपने 1000 टाइम इसे बोला, इसने 1000 टाइम कन्वर्ट करके कर्नल को दिया, कर्नल ने 1000 टाइम हार्ड डिस्क में सर्च किया और हर बार आंसर दिया नो, नॉट फाउंड, राइट? That means when you write the incorrect instruction to the shell का काम क्या है? कन्वर्ट करके इसको पकड़ा देना. When you keep doing it, तो अगर यहाँ पे कोई इंसान बैठा होता, मान लो आप बैठे होते, तो क्या होता? आपसे बार बार कोई कुछ पूछ रहा है, आप बोल रहे हो कि नहीं है नहीं है नहीं है, आपका दिमाग खराब हो जाएगा. तो ये अप्रोच इसलिए रिजेक्ट हो गई बिकॉज आपसे कोई पूछ रहा है, बार बार बता रहे हो नहीं ये है ही नहीं, ये है ही नहीं, राइट? अब आप अपने टर्म्स में क्या बोलेंगे, चूतिया है क्या अराउंड जो भी आप बोलेंगे, बट this approach got rejected due to this reason, right? Because if kernel is doing the check for the existence of command, that is not the good thing. Okay, so ये बात समझ में आई, ये reject क्यों हुआ था? Yes and no with your response in the chat window, right? जो लोग सेशन के बीच में टर्न आउट करते हैं, लाइक क्योंकि स्टार्टिंग में 50 फिर 54 एंड जो भी है, ओके गाइस, गिव योर रिस्पॉन्स इन द चैट विंडो वेरी क्विकली. Why this model got rejected? So you can just, okay, wonderful.